Okay, so this one is interesting. Let's create a directory called Invoke, and for now let's create a file named index, and in here we say random. Okay, so class, random class, and inside this class we're gonna say public function underscore invoke. And in this simple example, I'm going to demonstrate the difference between invoke and construct for those of you who may have some undone experience with the invoke method. So I create an object and new up the random class. If here I say php index.php, I get nothing. Some of you may expect that I get the var_dump. So if I change this to underscore construct, obviously I get the invoke. So first of all, the invoke is not as same as the construct. So let me copy all of this, and because we want to capture everything, I'm going to create new files every time we have something to add up. So in the same manner, if I comment this out and create an object and say var_dump is callable the class, and I explain what it is in a second. Okay, if I run index2.php, I get the false. What is callable? Is callable is very obvious by its context. It's true when the class can be called by its own, and it's false when it is not. So if I uncomment this, I obviously should get true. And if you take a look at this, I am just saying that can I call the class by its object? So just to remind you, before this we got public function, maybe some method named index and var_dump blah blah blah. So if I wanted to get access to anything inside this class, I had to say class object and say index, right? And if I do this, I get the blah. But in here, if you take a look at this, I'm just calling the object itself. Okay, let's get into more details in index3.php. So maybe if I have something like some class, and in here I say public function underscore invoke and say var_dump invoke, and here my object is controller, and I new up the some class. How can I use the invoke now? It's very simple. I can just call it as a function. I can use it as a function, and here I can say index and you get the invoke. So without knowing anything about the class, I get the callable class. So what is the actual use case in here? There are some quite a few usages in here. So there are some scenarios. For instance, you are following the solid principle and you have the single responsible controller or maybe class in which you have all the functionality inside one method. you're not following the CRUD maybe for index, show, update, or destroy, or maybe delete. You're not following that. If that's the case, the invoke method is the best practice for you. Or maybe you are using the class inside, I don't know, a job or anything like that. Just a class with one functionality, with one logic. So that's when you can call it, and you can maybe call it like this or any other object that you create from that class. So if I want to demonstrate an example, a simplistic one, but maybe come handy, I say we have a class add with obvious functionality to add up something to something else. So if I say function and I use the construct here, I have 2 and I have value, and here I say this 2 is equal to 2 and this value is equal to value. That's simple. That's what we had before. And maybe add up these 2 properties, but not private but protected. And in the next method, I just add up these 2 like this. I return that this 2 sums up with this value. Okay, and outside the class, if I say add is new add class, so obviously I have to pass on 2 numbers. For now, maybe you say it's not just numbers. Okay, I can cast it or anything, but let's just accept this. And so first of all, if I run this, I get nothing because it's not being echoed out. So first I have to write down the add. So if I write down the add, I get just the 2 attributes, the properties I declared. So you may expect it that I call it like this and I get the result, but there is no invoke just yet. So I have to call it the old-fashioned way, the result. And I get the 15 as a result. And yeah, this is obvious. So how can I make use of invoke method? And I admit this is a simplistic one, but you get the idea. So if I put the invoke in here, I can just say that you return the result for me. And how is the difference? How does that make any difference? So here I can just call the object itself, call the object of the add class. I get the same result. But what's the difference actually? With the add, I don't need to know anything about what's going on in the class. I don't need to know about the functionality of the results or what's going on in the construct. As long as I get the object from the class and call the object, I get the result. Okay, so I hope you got the idea of what's going on in here, but to sum it up, I guess I have to create another one in which, let's say, I have a class named home controller, just to make it a new name. And in here I have public function invoke. So there has been some questions maybe in your head that do we have to use the invoke just like this? The answer is no. You can simply add anything as a parameter, as a argument, as you may say, to the invoke method. So if I say class new up the home controller, so far so good. But if I say class and just run it, you obviously know that we get into the error because the invoke that has been called because it's here needs a parameter. So everything I put in here, I get in here, right? And I can simply break it like this to few arguments. But the vice versa is not applicable, right? If I put every other values, I don't get into error because it needs one parameter as the first one, and I got the first one in here. So as a result, to sum it up, you can, first of all, let me start from here. First of all, there is a difference, a huge difference between invoke and construct. With construct, every time you create an object, it shows up what it is in the construct. But with invoke, you don't get to print out anything by just calling the object. You have to make it callable, and we do it with the invoke method. And the invoke method can have arguments as much as you want. So this is the example of that. And some of the main usages of the invoke is when you are following the single responsibility principle, or you have a class which is going to have just one method. So in that scenario, you don't need to call it index as always, or show or update or anything like that. You can just call the method invoke and you will have the access to that object anytime you want without knowing what is going on in that class specifically. So I hope you can make use of the invoke method. Let's go to the other magic method in the PHP.